recommended to the House.
Gillian Genter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm keen to speak on this bill because it does represent an area that I am greatly passionate about. In my whole career, I've been interested in finding positive solutions to climate change because I care deeply about the future of our people and our planet. And I know that most New Zealanders share that concern and share those values. They care about the long term, and they want to see the government implementing smart solutions that are going to look after our precious natural environment and our people. But unfortunately, this national government is letting New Zealanders down. And I think they mean well, and certainly it does demonstrate that the Greens have shown enormous leadership over the past decade or two, that now every party in Parliament is talking seriously about the need to respond to climate change and in support of clean, green transport. That is a huge win for the Green Party, who have been talking about climate change and clean electric vehicle policy the longest, I think, of any party in Parliament. But this national government, while they mean well and they've changed their rhetoric, the truth is that they are far more focused on the short term and about getting those PR wins that make it look like they're taking action when fundamentally their policy isn't going to create the changes that New Zealanders really need. This policy in particular falls well short of one that would actually make it easier for more New Zealand families and businesses to afford electric vehicles. Now, the Green Party will support the bill because these changes that they're proposing to the ECA levies and transport levies are quite good, and that's pretty straightforward. Basically, it's allowing the levy collected from the electricity industry to be spent on other areas like transport, so energy efficiency, not just electricity efficiency, and to allow the existing petrol and diesel levies to be used to fund ECA. And I think that makes a lot of sense because obviously energy conservation and efficiency is more than just electricity, and particularly with New Zealand's profile where about half of our climate pollution from energy comes from transport, not from electricity. Of course, we need a strategy to ensure that we have a greater percentage of renewable electricity in New Zealand, and that's something National is failing to deliver, unfortunately. And we need a smarter approach to transport. Now, if the government was really serious and really enthusiastic about electric vehicles, then they would implement policy that would actually accelerate the uptake of electric vehicles in New Zealand. But we know that their strategy isn't going to do that because the very targets that they've adopted are actually lower than what Ministry of Transport officials forecast would happen without any policy assistance. So, although Simon Bridges, the minister, is quite keen to be seen in every photo op with a new piece of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, the reality is this government has done nothing to incentivize or financially support the installation of that charging infrastructure. And that is something that one could have reasonably expected them to do if they wanted to have more electric vehicles in New Zealand. That's what countries like Norway, who have succeeded in massively increasing the amount of electric vehicles on the road, have done. They had government support for electric charging infrastructure across the country, and that would be the Green Party's policy. The next part of the policy that is incredibly short-sighted and was actually very much discouraged by the officials is the policy of allowing electric vehicles to use bus lanes and public transport lanes. Now, if you want really efficient transport, not just energy efficient, but also transport that's going to move more people and goods in crowded urban areas, then the smartest way to do that is to build a fast, modern public transport network and use rail to get goods to and from the port, not putting more trucks on Auckland's already overcrowded roads. And amazingly, that type of infrastructure is far more cost-effective and entirely affordable, and yet the national government hasn't been properly investing in it, even though it's going to give us the greatest bang for buck in terms of our next dollar spent in transport. in terms of not just reducing pollution, but actually making it easier for people to get to work, to get to school, for those goods to get to and from the port. The best way to do that is to put more of our capital investment into our rail network and to protect those busways that we've already built that are now moving. The Northern Busway is now moving as many people as all of the lanes on the Auckland Harbour Bridge at peak time. So why would we make that less efficient by allowing a few people in electric vehicles to use it? And I guarantee that that's not going to be the incentive that makes it easier for households to afford an electric vehicle. So ultimately, it's going to be the well-off people who have the money, who are able to spend $60,000 on a new electric vehicle, are going to benefit from being able to use the bus lane, and it's going to actually make it harder for 50 people on the bus to get to work. Does that seem fair? Does that seem efficient? No, it's a terrible idea, and that's why Norway, who actually had this policy, are phasing it out, because it disrupts the provision of efficient public transport services which can move many times more people. A busway can move 10,000 people an hour. A railway can move 20,000 people an hour. This is why electric vehicles cannot compete with public transport for moving people in busy, crowded urban areas like Auckland. And I have news for the National Party. I have been campaigning on the North Shore Rail project on the North Shore. We've been surveying people of the North Shore. There is virtually 100% support for that project. That's what people want. And I'd say half or more of the people we talked to voted for the National Party. So it's time to get with the program and deliver what people actually want, what's actually going to work, and be more cost effective. Finally, the road user charges exemptions for electric vehicles are not the most effective way of delivering affordable electric vehicles for businesses or households. And even the Treasury said that in their advice to the minister. We have, under the OIA, advice from the Treasury saying, it doesn't make sense to spend this money exempting the road user charges. We need those road user charges to pay for the transport network. I mean, if you're going to have many more people using electric vehicles, it's going to create a whole lot of congestion. How are we going to invest in the capital infrastructure that's going to deal with that if we're not charging for the use of the road? That doesn't really make much sense. But what would make sense is using the money to reduce the purchase price of electric vehicles, actually make it more affordable for people to buy the electric vehicle in the first place. And that is why the Green Party has a comprehensive electric vehicle policy which will work. And unsurprisingly, since we are the first party that was really campaigning seriously on climate change and coming up with the solutions, we have the most practical policy. And it's very simple. 1, government invests in infrastructure that's going to move more people and goods. 2, government invests in infrastructure like electric charge infrastructure and supports private business to do that, but coordinates both the public and private installation of that infrastructure to ensure there is a network that people can use. 3, government procurement. I know my colleagues in the Labour Party have been talking about this. This is incredibly important from a leadership perspective. Government is spending huge sums of money on vehicles, both for cabinet ministers, but also across the whole of government, whether it's DHBs, whether it's corrections. There are all sorts of government vehicles. Where possible, we should be prioritizing the purchase of electric vehicles and clean vehicles, because it's better for New Zealand. It's better for the long term. It makes sense, and if we're going to spend the money, we might as well do it in a way that's going to look after the environment. Finally, the Green Party looked at the policies that have been effective around the world at increasing the uptake of electric vehicles. And in Norway, they had a huge tax on vehicles. All of their new cars were subject to this big tax. And they exempted the tax from electric vehicles, and now they have 1 out of 4 new vehicles being sold in Norway is electric. By 2025, one won't be allowed to purchase a diesel or petrol vehicle. It will only be electric. It's been incredibly effective, and it was that reducing the purchase price of the electric vehicles what worked. Now, we don't have a big tax on vehicles here in New Zealand, but we do have the fringe benefit tax. And in fact, 80% of the new vehicles that are brought into this country are company cars. So we said, why don't we have an exemption, a fringe benefit tax on electric vehicles for 7 years, really give that incentive to businesses to buy buy electric vehicles. They will save money on the operating costs as well, but giving that possibility of dropping the cost will make it much more attractive to buy an electric vehicle. And within 3 to 5 years, we will have developed a second-hand electric vehicle market so ordinary households in New Zealand can buy an electric vehicle.